Now, a number of transport stories today. The first one is a UK story, but there's no reason to suggest it would not apply here. And that's about the glare from headlights.
Yeah, big glare from headlights. And the RAC in the UK, which is no relation to us, have been looking at this for a while, and they've done an extensive survey of UK motorists. And UK motorists are saying that it's a problem that's getting much worse. They're complaining more and more about glare. A lot of them are blaming the high mounted lights on SUV shaped vehicles. And anyway, it seems to have triggered things because the UK government has announced that it's going to review those rules and may change them. To some extent, it might be sort of flexing its Brexit prerogative because in the European Union, they're all type approved at EU level.
So, what are we talking about? I mean, time was you had a tungsten bulb that you could change if it went wallop. Now you've got halogen, xenon, LED.
Yeah, and all incredibly clever light units, sometimes containing things like LiDAR and all that sort of stuff. Changing a light bulb can be a very expensive thing and a difficult thing these days, whereas previously, vans used to carry spare bulbs. You do it in a flash. And a lot of models still do, sensibly designed models. You can still get your bulb replaced in Halfords. But there are cars that are, frankly, a bit over-spec'd, and they push back on the consumer whenever any repair
And
needs to
then
be
you
done.
have to change the whole unit in
Change
many
the
of
whole
them.
unit had needless expense, and maybe in time that's something the European Union could look at because that's the place to regulate it, not at Irish level but at European level. But it does seem to be a sort of an excessive demand on
So,
consumers for minor
what is the
repairs.
British government talking about doing? I mean, outlawing xenon or outlawing LED or the intensity of them? Because, I mean, the more light you have on the road on a dark winter's night, the better.
Well, yes and no. The better for you, but not
Yeah.
necessarily the better for other road users.
No, but we're always being told, and I heard it again yesterday, that pedestrians, this is one of the lobby groups who are taking on the Road Safety Authority, saying there's no need for pedestrians to wear high vis. It's up to the motorist to see them.
Yeah,
Now, when I hear that, I just think, yeah, so you can have that as the epitaph on your tombstone. I didn't wear high vis because it's the driver's fault.
Yeah, I just think that's a ridiculous position. I sort of get the ideology, and there is a degree of sense in saying, look, the streets should primarily be for people. It's the car that should be looking out. But for heaven's sake, you teach your small child how to cross the road in safety.
Sure.
You don't tell them off you go. It's the driver's job to stop. That just seems a crazy position. And back to the Brits and the headlights, there may not be much they can do individually, to be honest, because it doesn't make sense to do individual type approval regulations for the UK. It makes much more sense to do it at European level. But even from outside, it may be influential. And I think it's one of those things the European Union needs to keep continually looking at. They permanently update type approval regulations on all sorts of things, emissions, this, that, and the other. And there is a design trend of cars getting too big, too heavy, with over-spec'd, unnecessary equipment. And as I say, it's an unwelcome
Yeah.
trend. And if it can be stopped somewhere, maybe the
So
EU's the
the British
place.
government is going to have an independent examination of this.
Yeah,
I can hear the can rolling down the
being
road.
booted down the road. Yes, the British government are every bit as good as our own at the can booting skill that they require.
Now, let's get closer to home. Two EV stories. One
Yeah.
that we were going to cover last week, but events overtook us. And that is about the lack of an adequate charging infrastructure for the EV fleet we have. And then the news that sales of EVs year on year were down last month.
Yeah, they certainly had a very bad quarter. EV sales are down overall in the context when overall car sales are up. So general sales in the first quarter of 2024 up by around 8%, but the EV, and specifically the pure battery electric vehicle, the market share for that has dropped by about 14%. Now that's a little alarming, and you wonder what's causing that. On the charging network, I think it's fairer to say, Pat, that while we still have a long way to go on the charging network, it is genuinely a lot better than it was. I mean, in looking at the story, I reached out to there's a Facebook group for EV owners and various other sources and all that, and a lot of them are feeding back that they're getting used to it. It's much better than it used to be. The charging network on motorways, for example, is pretty good on the M6, M7. There are some relative deserts that the EV owners know, like the M1 can be difficult, the M8 can be difficult, but it's getting better. And we're also seeing a lot more things like destination charging. So hotels, B&Bs, any destination car park. And we put in EV chargers in our car park on Dawson Street, proving very, very popular. So it's not as difficult as it used to be, and you're not as reliant on the public network. And the vast bulk of people will charge at home most of the time, but it's still deficient. And notwithstanding the guys on Facebook who'll no doubt push back at me, at the moment it still requires a degree of intrepidity, if you like, to take your EV off cross country, and that is probably one of the barriers that's mitigating against the sales.
Yeah. I mean, one of the aspects of this is the maximum range in even the most expensive Mercedes, for example. You're looking at a declared range of maybe 600, a little bit more maybe, real world 500. So if you want to drive your big Merc all the way to Donegal and back in the same day, you've got to kind of plan to stop for an hour or so
Yeah.
in Donegal to charge up again.
Yeah, and now that would be a relatively rare event for you to want to drive 1,000 kilometers in a single day. I mean, even if you're the owner of a great big Merc, you probably don't do that terribly often. And as destination charging and as the ranges go up, I think the need or the reliance on the public charge network will probably diminish somewhat. Mind you, and again, we're back to manufacturers, they're doing with EV range claims what they did with miles per gallon back in the 70s, where they'd run an engine on a bench and give you a theoretical story that, never ever matched up to real world experience. Car owners back in the day would roll their eyes at a claimed MPG figure, and something similar. So I wish they wouldn't, for marketing purposes, but if they overpromise and underdeliver, it rather frustrates the owner.
It's better to do the opposite. I mean, the reality is a battery performs better in summer in warmer temperatures than it does in winter. And then on top of that, you have the draining of the battery through the air conditioning, the wipers going all the time, and so on and so forth. Heated seats, as it happens, don't drain the battery that much at all.
Well, there you go, and I like my heated seats, but in that real world usage, you are still getting electric vehicles that are now comfortably giving you 350, 400 kilometers on a single charge, and that's fantastic.
And how many people, ordinary people, commuters, do much more than that in a week?
Again, if for now there are long distance commuters, there's plenty of them out there, but in the general usage case, that'd be a pretty rare event. So your battery electric vehicle will do everything that your internal combustion engine will do, and we really should be assisting the push towards them. Government originally had a target of nearly 1 million battery electric vehicles by 2030. Not going to be within an ass's roar of that target, which is a pity, but okay, maybe it was too stretchy a target. But even trying to achieve what we can achieve, when soft things cut against it, like last year, for example, a couple of important tax changes, the electric vehicle lost its toll perk. And used to get very cheap tolls, and that's gone. The benefit in kind on electric vehicles for people who use them as company cars, government has announced a plan to taper that down. So the consumer is looking at this going, the tax promises are kind of being withdrawn. Remember what they did to diesel? They gave us cheap diesel cars and then upped the price of diesel. So I think you're fueling, pardon the pun, you're fueling skepticism there. And then also just in other conversations that Eamon Ryan and his department and local authorities are having, there's a tendency in conflating issues together to demonise all cars. So, you look at a transport strategy for Dublin, for example, and, they're absolutely blind to whether it's a zero emission vehicle or whether it's an old diesel. They just want to push out cars. And the consumer hears that. So, if a battery electric vehicle isn't going to get the tax perk, is going to be a bit more expensive, and now you have a local authority telling you your car's too heavy, we're going to tax it, it sort of pulls back on the promises and incentives. Whereas if we're really going for it, gangbusters, to switch the fleet to battery electric, there's a lot more that we could be doing.
Now, some of the comments coming in, can you ask Conor about this? When it comes to accidents on our roads, all the talk is about mobile phone use, drink and drug driving. I hear no one talking about screens in cars. I, for one, have veered off the road while using a touch screen. They are so dangerous. That's from Paul.
Yeah, there is a bit of research on that, distracted driving generally, and they began to research it when the mobile phone first came along. And I remember early conversations about, is a mobile phone conversation more distracting than listening to a football match on the radio? The answer is yes, it is, and it's now extensively studied, and it's to do with cognitive impairment and things like that. If you have a smart touch screen in your car, which loads of cars do these days, it depends how you use it. You can use
But, I mean, bring
properly.
back the buttons, more buttons in cars, because when everything is done through the screen, Like you decide that it's got a bit warm and you need to switch on the air conditioning, and you have to go into the screen, pick the air conditioning element of that, and then adjust it. I
Yeah.
mean, really, you should pull into the side to do that, but most people don't. They tap away and fiddle away, taking their eyes off the road.
Very much so. And car designers need to think about ordinary users. There tends to be an assumption of expertise. If I'm sure if Jess Kelly sat in the car, she'd get in 2 seconds flat, she'd have it all figured out.
Yeah, but
And,
she doesn't
wouldn't
drive.
be, well, there you go. But there's plenty, plenty, plenty of us who, give somebody an app with submenus and they're bewildered. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS was a classic design acronym. And again, I think car designers need to bear that in mind. Yes, you have the capability to give us all sorts of gadgets and bells and whistles. You know what? When driving a car, we really don't need them. Keep the driver interaction as simple as possible.
Another text. EVs are fine for urban living, but impractical for rural life. We hear now about hydrogen enriched diesel. Does Connor know anything about this?
Well, yeah, it's another transitionary thing. And look, a diesel engine will burn essentially any oil. You can modify a diesel engine. It was originally designed to burn peanut oil. It was fossilized oil replaced that. So yeah, you can burn lots of things in a diesel, including hydrogen enriched and biofuels and all that sort of stuff. But in the long run, battery electric is a better technology. We'll continue to have conversations about, how lithium is mined and
Mm.
how much carbon goes into the manufacture of a car. But it's a no-brainer. These things are zero emission in our cities. There was a report out last week that showed that Dublin has amongst the best air quality of all the major cities in the world. You simply won't hear that when they're talking about shutting down the keys.
Mm.
And again, this tendency to conflate issues. If we're talking about climate and air quality, we should be gangbusters backing battery electric vehicles. If we just have a philosophy that says, if it's got four wheels, we don't want it in our cities, well, then, you know what? Not only do I think you're wrong in that, but it's actually pulling against some of the climate objectives and causing a reluctance to buy electric cars.